So the organisers rather rashly asked me to reflect on my impressions of the day's proceedings, and I even more rashly accepted to do so, which is why I've been making notes right down to the last minute. My conclusions are these. The core phenomenon which underlies all that we've been looking at today is the growth of a service-based model of production and personal work relations and contracting for employment. This has encouraged two quite closely related but distinct developments. Firstly, the rapid enlargement of an on-demand or gig economy of micro-engagements for work. Secondly, but differently, employing enterprises increasingly constituting these work relations as relations of self-employment. Abigail Adams and Stephen Machin helped me very much to understand the interplay between these two distinctive but converging developments. Hugh Collins identified from the outset that the crucial facilitator of these developments is digitization especially of management and contracting for personal work relations. This by reducing the transaction costs of the dissolution of work arrangements into micro-engagements. In that sense, we are all becoming platform workers. Even Oxford University more closely now resembles a digital platform employer than when I retired from its employment 5 years ago. So, if you reflect upon it, does a city solicitor's office or any government department, including perhaps the HMRC itself, let alone an orthodox digital platform such as Uber or Deliveroo? Jeremias, Prassl and Judith Freedman, between them, showed how these developments had placed the traditional classification structures under great strain, both on the side of employment law and practice, and on the side of tax law and practice. Judith Freedman confirmed that view, and on the tax law side, about which I've always been relatively ignorant, and posed the central question: should we be seeking to reform both systems in tandem, the employment law classification system and the tax law classification system, or in harmony with each other, or should we reform each system separately? I can't, in the time available, begin to do justice to individual contributions which have borne upon that central question. But here are my main conclusions. The employment law system and the tax law system have both fragmented around the traditional binary divide between employment and self-employment. But they've done so in different ways. We saw how the employment law system has fragmented into, Anne Davis's contribution was especially important here, into a tripartite system of a distinction between three categories: employees, workers who are not employees, and those in business on or self-employed, but on their own account, with perhaps, as Jeremias indicated, an emergent fourth owner-manager category. Many speakers identified complexities in the tax system which I had not previously understood, but which thoroughly confirmed for me a picture in which the tax system, taking it overall and including the crucial national insurance contribution and benefit system and tax credits and so on, has become even more complicated than that, incapable, I think, even of now being simply reduced to a tripartite or quadripartite system. It has become more complicated than that. One only needs to think of the now quite long-standing set of arrangements around IR35, which complicate that picture, but new elements were brought into the discussion, most informatively for me, such as, to give one of many examples, the introduction at a certain point of that very interesting commerciality test for genuine self-employment, and so on. The very valuable comparative system session that we had in the second part of the morning demonstrated comparable complexities, though the precise details worked out very differently, in each of the different national systems which we were told about. I was left in no doubt that the underlying situation was one of increasing complexity and lack of resolution, and an increasingly complex playing off between the employment law classification system and the tax and social security classification systems. We were left with a general sense of the huge difficulty of increasing the equity and the rationality of both the employment law system and the tax system. My very tentative conclusion, reverting to Judith's core inquiry, is that the two systems, the employment law system on the one hand, and the tax and national insurance system on the other hand, each need to be reformed, but in different ways, rather than by an attempt at harmonization, particularly rather than by an attempt at harmonization around a renewed binary divide between employment and self-employment, because I truly think that would be futile and unattainable. I think that on the employment side, the tripartite classification system which has emerged is working, shall we say, tolerably well. As we've heard, there is a huge problem about the way in which it is disturbed and destabilized by the doctrine of the requirement of mutual obligation for a valid, or at least a continuing, contract of employment, or probably also now a valid or continuing workers' contract. But that apart, it is proving more or less sustainable, I think, in its emerging tripartite form, but leaving us with a very great need to concentrate on the control of the abusive or exploitative manifestations of ultra-precarious or 0 hours contracting. I think there is, we have not yet begun to address the needs and difficulties of that practice, and let me say that, if I may, that what I've so far heard about what seems to be emerging from Matthew Taylor's review process has not inspired a confidence in me that there is a fundamental tackling of that set of problems in prospect. I do not regard, for example, the suggestion of a right to request fixed hours working as beginning to plumb the depths of the difficulties of that situation. Sorry, lost my place. I think that on the tax law side, it is more about re-establishing equitable incentivization between different ways of working in a contracting environment in which a simple binary divide between employment and self-employment has become dysfunctional, especially as we were very dramatically, as was very dramatically demonstrated at various points with regard to national insurance contributions and benefits. But a situation in which a new framework has not yet emerged. On that side, I think that, if I may put it, if I'm not overstating it, the existing system seems to be dying, but the new one has yet to be born. On that very optimistic note, I hand over for further discussion.